Welcome very much to the 21st monthly meeting of the UK MTB Trail Alliance. In a moment, I will hand over to Outscape's Philip Weston and Karen Coulter. They'll talk us through the background and progress of Northern Ireland's recently launched trail volunteer maintenance scheme. So developed by Outscape, the team behind MountainBikeNI, Cycling Ireland and the Outdoor Partnership, the scheme has for the first time enabled volunteers to contribute to trail maintenance across Northern Ireland's trail centres. Cycling Ireland's Gary McKeegan and the Outdoor Partnership's Gary Donaldson are also on hand to contribute during the Q&A session after the presentation. So having said that, over to you, Philip.
Thanks very much, Robin. Thanks all. Thanks for having us and giving us the opportunity to introduce you to our mountain bike maintenance scheme that we've been working on over the last year. I think pretty much all of you are not Northern Ireland, so you probably won't be familiar with this unless you've read some of the press releases or social media posts. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a bit of an insight into, I suppose, mountain biking in Northern Ireland, just a bit of a potted history and where we are at the moment. Talk to you a wee bit about what we do with Mountain Bike Northern Ireland, and then Karen's going to give you a bit of an introduction to the mountain bike maintenance scheme. And where it came from, and what we've been doing with it. Before we do, I just wanted to introduce Gary McKeegan and Gary Donaldson. So those are two of our key partners. So I'm just going to let them give a brief introduction for themselves. So Gary McKeegan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm Gary McKeegan. I'm Regional Development Officer for Cycling Ulster, working for Cycling Ireland. And probably had a background in cycling all my life. And one of my key areas I came in just over a year ago was to work around this access to forest and improving the trails that are there. So that's where I've come from, and hopefully over the last year I've been able to work with the guys here to try and bring that to fruition, to make sure that our trails are there for the future and developed. And I suppose for me, and I'm probably saying this, is that long term we show them what we can do on the trail maintenance before we can move into making new trails and better trails.
Gary D.
Hi, I'm Gary Donaldson. I work for the Outdoor Partnership, which is actually a Welsh-based charity, but through funding they've expanded to Northern Ireland and I suppose across the rest of the UK as well. We don't just look at mountain biking, we look at, I suppose, getting people in the outdoors, from anything to everything. But I am a mountain biker, a very passionate one. So this was right up my street. And yeah, it's great now just to have so many like-minded people around the one table and really get a bit of momentum with this project.
So that's the partnership. We also have Ethan, who will introduce himself in a moment. I'll give you your slides for that, Ethan. So just briefly on what we are at Outscape. So we're basically a not-for-profit organisation. We work across the island of Ireland, so within Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland. And we work with statutory, non-statutory bodies, with private landowners, public landowners, etc. And we try to advocate for the integration of outdoor recreation in policies and strategies across Northern Ireland. We help to develop framework strategies and action plans across the island. We deliver on trail development for walking, cycling, mountain biking, for horse riding, etc. across. And we also offer sectoral training to try and increase awareness of outdoor recreation, and try to implement participation programs. So we do a range of different tasks, all with the idea of making it easier for people to enjoy the outdoors responsibly. And we've been about since 1999, and we really are passionate about what we do. So just as a bit of a sort of a potted history of Outscape and mountain biking in Northern Ireland. So we were previously Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland up until a couple of years ago. And our original role within mountain biking really started, I suppose, from our formation in 1999, but it's all started to sort of kick off in 2002, whenever we worked with Sport Northern Ireland and local government departments to deliver on the NI's first strategy for off-road cycling, which at the time included mountain biking. And you can see that took a while to get going and to get things on the ground. And we got our first trail centre delivered in 2011, and that was Blessingbourne Estate up in 5 Mile Town. So that was during the era whenever trail centres were king. And throughout the next few years, we delivered a number of trails through funding from predominantly from tourism. but also from sport and participation to deliver additional trail centres within Dava Forest, Castlewellan Forest, Rostrevor and Barnett's domain, which is in Belfast. In 2013, we launched Mountain Bike Northern Ireland, which is our consumer platform and the method by which we promote mountain biking in Northern Ireland. And Ethan will talk to you a little bit about that. So since then, we've delivered on Gosford Forest Park. We hosted the Single Speed European Championships in Castlewellan back in 2014. And then we've also delivered a number of different master plans and pilots for trying to improve and increase access over the years. And then most recently, we sit on the UK Trails Project Steering Group. And then also this project, the Mountain Bike Maintenance Scheme, which is something that we've been delivering over the last year. I suppose it's important to point out that there's no single mountain bike lead in Northern Ireland. So, there's no dim bins are the same. So Outscape, we've always sort of fulfilled that role to try and help achieve those strategic aims with that early development, which was focused on tourism, economic development, following the models of Scotland and elsewhere. And then sort of as that's progressed and evolved over the year, we've tried to stay on top of it. So in relation to, I suppose, a bit of context for mountain biking and access in Northern Ireland, we have the most restrictive access legislation within the UK. We have less than 240 kilometres of public rights of way, and you can compare that to, I think it's just about 267,000 kilometres of public rights of way in England, the right to roam in Scotland. So we have a lot of sort of a bit of a battle on to try and get access. Public land in Northern Ireland comprises about 6% of the total land area, so we've got quite a significant portion of the land that is owned by private landowners. Another sort of barrier to access, which continues to impinge some of the work that we do and try and do. So access generally is permitted for walk and horse riding through permits and designated off-road cycling, and mountain biking is officially carried out on designated trails, and those are typically within those trail centres that we've delivered over the years, and that's managed through formal agreement between Forest Service, which is our main public landowner, particularly for mountain biking access, and the local councils. So for example, one of our trail centres, which is Dava Forest over in County Tyrone, which Gary Donaldson is very familiar with. So the land is owned by Forest Service Northern Ireland, but the recreational trails, the mountain biking trails, the visitor centre, the car parking, etc., that's all managed by the Mid-Ulster District Council. So you can imagine that there's sort of a raft of complexity whenever it comes to trying to get access. We have had some successes in relation to developing local arrangements, and one of those examples is the Cave Hill Mountain Bike Club, where they worked with the local council on public land to formalise some informal trails, and you may well have heard that through Byrne, who sits on the board within the Alliance. So as I mentioned, there's not one single body that leads on mountain biking in Northern Ireland. We currently don't have a strategy, but we do have lots of ambition. You can hear that in Gary Donaldson, Gary McKeegan, Karen, and Ethan and myself. And we are all wanting to work towards continuing to improve and grow mountain biking. We want to do this through participation, events, improved accessibility, trail development, and improved access. And what we find is, as everyone finds, is that it's all about relationship building. It's all about trust. So what we're trying to do with this particular project, with the UK Trails project, with the work that was done previously in the middle, is all about bringing the riding community, landowners, land managers together to try and build that trust, develop skill sets, etc., to try and get an improved situation within Northern Ireland. So I'm just going to hand over to Ethan. Ethan's going to give you a bit of an introduction to Mountain Bike Northern Ireland.
So the MountainBikeNI brand was formed, as Philip said, in 2013, and it came at a time that was just this incredible boom. Northern Ireland went from having no trail centres at the beginning of 2012 to having 5 or 6 by 2014. So all the momentum was going towards mountain biking. It was seen that trail centres were just going to pop up here, there, and everywhere. Phase 2 plans were being developed. Phase 3 plans were being discussed by some very ambitious councils. And within all of that, there was the understanding that it would be beneficial to have one central brand that was able to promote and cross promote and be sort of mutually beneficial to all of the land managers that were creating these sites. Obviously, reality is very very different in terms of once the trails were up, there was a significant amount of investment, cost and time from land managers, and there was a natural delay. And but MountainBikeNI has been there through sort of thick and thin to try and continue and draw that line between the mountain bikers' ambitions and the land managers' sort of realities on the ground. It's going back to that relationship building, which is incredibly important. So one of the key ways that we are keen to benefit the land managers is by selling Northern Ireland as a must-visit mountain bike destination, and that basically means we're promoting the trails, but we're also promoting the businesses that are getting involved with the trails as much as possible, and that's features mostly around accommodation and eateries, but also the likes of Bite and others that are involved in the sector within Northern Ireland. So that was an ambition, and we continue to work with councils, work with local businesses, and partner where we can with the tourist board whenever they decide they want a few good mountain bike shots or videos, they come to us. So content creation is a big part of what we do, and I should stress that MountainBikeNI, well, in terms of a brand, in terms of our recognition, is very strong. We've got a following that would rival almost any other sort of central body within UK or Ireland. But we do that within a very confined budget. So we sort of get budget to do photographs or video or some combination of this, usually once a year. Most recently, we had to develop a new website. Just the old one, again, had been developed back in 2012 with an original unique coding, which was a nightmare to change. So we ended up developing a new website. So again, going back to we're trying to be there as the go-to, the one-stop shop for mountain bikers, particularly those that maybe are new to the sport, to be the resource in terms of showing them where they can mountain bike within Northern Ireland and what they can do, and making it appealing as well. So we're doing that within the Northern Ireland, and in the wider Ireland context, we advertise to the Republic of Ireland. So to mountain bikers that are potentially looking for a trip away, a trip north just to try different trails, we would try and assist with the promotion of that. Over the years, we also the sort of particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, actually, the element of the suitability of the trails to ride has become an increasingly important factor, with more and more storms coming into our radar, and so that's a key asset we provide to the land managers as well. We share all the information in terms of the damage to the trails, and actually we're working on the minute on an idea that Karen had, which was basically to try and make an interactive map which showcases which sections of the trail are suitable and which are damaged, so making it a wee bit more specific. So you can see there the list of all the things we do. I think we've got a video. Now, whether the video is going to play for us, if we try giving this a go, but if the sound doesn't work, then it'll still give you a bit of an idea in terms of what we do, and what we're aiming to showcase. So yeah, sorry, apologies for the sound, folks. I suppose what the key element actually of what's happening here is that we have local mountain bikers talking in the background about what makes their trail centre, like what makes this is Davit Forest here, what makes Davit particularly appealing to them. So it's local authentic voices talking about elements of the trail that they love. So it's not fabricated, it's genuine, and it comes from local mountain bikers. And then we skip on to Rochever, and it's the same thing, this time coming from a local business person who is talking about the sort of what they get out of mountain biking and how important it is to the local area. And then it goes on to Castlewellan. So this just is a short snippet from the website. So this showcases all of the pump tracks, trail centres, and skills parks that we have across Northern Ireland. We have a big with the consortium, as you saw at the start there. We have a funding model which is supported by 3 councils: Belfast City Council, Mid Ulster Council, and Newry Morning Down. And so we have to have a special emphasis within the trail centres that are part of them. But we are very cognizant of the fact that mountain bikers want to know about all trails, official and unofficial, and that is where the maintenance scheme has become a really valuable asset. So Karen, Philip, and I sort of came up with this, and it was ticking all the boxes in terms of it solved a problem for land managers, but it was also building relationships with mountain bikers and trust with mountain bikers. So Karen, I will let you take over from there on the maintenance scheme.
Thanks, Ethan. Okay, so the maintenance scheme was developed through a partnership between MountainBikeNI, the consortium there that Ethan was explaining, through Cycling Ireland and the Outdoor Partnership. So collaboratively, we developed the scheme. Training was provided by Campbell Coaching, and I see Bob on the call there. So Campbell Coaching very experienced in providing this training across the UK. And the scheme has been supported by developing mountain biking in Scotland as well, particularly through Dave Evans and the UK Trails Project. The scheme's been supported by the 6 different councils and Mourne Heritage Trust, who are responsible for the management and maintenance of our trail centres in Northern Ireland. So the training that was provided is accredited through the Association of Trail Builders, ATB, and it was provided within 3 tiers. So inspection training, maintenance coordinator training, and maintenance skills as well. And that was provided to a mix of land managers and volunteers. So just looking at roles and responsibilities, the trail inspection training, that training was provided to land managers who carry out the routine formal inspections of the trail centres to identify what maintenance work needs to be carried out. That course also comes into relevance then whenever maintenance works has taken place. The inspector then inspects the trail to make sure that the trail still meets the intended grade and signs it off. Maintenance coordinator then, the training looked at organising and supervising trail maintenance days, looking at maintaining essential documentation and health and safety compliance. And that maintenance coordinator training was provided to a mixture of land manager staff and a trained volunteer at each of the trail centres. So that was really important to us, that we had that relationship building and that collaboration where land managers and volunteers are working together to plan, to organise and to deliver those maintenance sessions. And then maintenance skills training provided to the volunteers as well. So the seed was planted really with us at the Scottish Mountain Bike Conference last November, where we seen maintenance taking place with the Glentress Trail ferries. So that was a feature within the conference. And we thought we really need to bring this back to Northern Ireland and establish a similar maintenance structure and bring across Campbell Coaching. So Ali and Bob came across in April to provide training across 4 days at Dava Trail Centre. And since then, we've been working with land managers to organise a series of maintenance sessions. So we've had sessions at Gorchin, at Dava, Castlewellan, and more recently Garva there just last week. So these are just photos from the inspection and maintenance coordinator training, which was a mixture of classroom training and hands-on out on the ground doing inspections and looking at how to plan maintenance works and health and safety compliance. We also looked at tools, what tools you might use for what different tasks, how to use the tools safely. Just some photos then from the maintenance skills training with the land managers and volunteers. So again, looking at the tools, looking at the practical application of the tools, when to use what tools, and getting that hands-on experience was really important. It also was important to allow the best food ever. Yeah, so Mid-Ulster, you'll never go hungry if they're providing training. So you always get well fed whenever you're within Mid-Ulster District Council. So great food, a chance for land managers to actually meet the volunteers, to chat to them, to start that relationship building was really important, and getting stuck in and having a bit of fun with the maintenance as well. So different types of tasks that we looked at then: vegetation clearance, looking at trail surfacing, looking at drainage as well, so block drains, where drainage is required and how to do it appropriately. Looking at features as well, so this was a berm. Credit to Gary Donaldson, so photo on the left is the before and the photo on the right is the after. So improving 2 berms back to back just to improve the flow of the trail, as well as use of the whacker plate and suitable compaction. So looking at pump tracks and how they're maintained and how to use the whacker plate safely through our works. So just some photos of some of the sessions, the successful sessions we've had so far. So this is at Dava, was our very first session. You can see vegetation overgrowth on the left there on some of the berms, some loose material, and on the right you can see vegetation's been removed, trail surface regraded and compacted so that the trail flows a lot better and it's a lot more fun and safer to ride as well. Just some more photos of that first session. Smiles all around, goodie bags from Mid-Ulster. Gorching Glens, the first session there, you can see before and after as well. So on the left there, the berm completely gone, and on the right, completely rebuilt. So improving the flow of the trail, enjoyability, as well as safety. So you can see berm on the left there, no berm. On the right, there was a berm created, which improved the safety of the trail, and the flow and the fun. So Gary Donaldson testing it out there, really important to get that aspect. So build and test and go again. No better man for the job. So yeah. And our most recent session at Garva, which took place there just on Friday. This section of trail had been closed since Clear Felon that took place a couple of months ago. So the section hadn't been ridden in a while, was quite overgrown, vegetation removed and some of the features reinstated. And we've already heard some great feedback on the socials. I've got some messages of saying people have been out. That's my local trail centre. They've been out riding the trail and they're really impressed that it's riding so much better and they're really enjoying it and seeing the fruits of the labour. So well done to all involved in that. So just a kind of a roundup then in terms of stats. We had 7 land managers, all 7 land managers that have trails supporting the scheme. We had 126 volunteer applications whenever we put out for expressions of interest, which just shows the high demand and support for the scheme. We trained 14 inspectors, 14 maintenance coordinators, 10 land managers in maintenance skills and 19 volunteers in maintenance skills, with the limited budget we had for training this year. But we are hopeful to train more people next year and to grow the maintenance scheme organically, I guess. We also helped each of the land managers to put in an order for tools to make sure that they're fully equipped the maintenance tasks safely and appropriately. And we've had 4 trail centres with sessions so far, which has totaled up to 78 volunteer hours over 5 sessions to date. So we're off to a strong start. And our ambition is to continue to build on this success and improve and grow access for mountain biking in Northern Ireland. So hopefully we'll have every trail centre, so each of the 7 hold a session before the year's out is the ambition. Getting a little bit late in the year and the dark evenings coming in, but hopefully at least 1 session at each trail centre. Help land managers to put together a maintenance plan over the winter months and put together a schedule for 2026 to hold at least 4 sessions at each trail centre, if not more, and to seek funding for more training. So we're hopeful that we have some funding in place and hopefully need to get the details nailed down, but we'll get Ali and Bob back over hopefully in the spring to do another round of training with staff and volunteers to grow the scheme and to continue then to build on those partnerships to develop mountain biking in Northern Ireland. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. I think that's the end of our slides, is it, Philip? So happy to take any questions now that anybody has.
That's the end. Thanks very much, Karen and Ethan. Hopefully that gives you a wee bit of an insight into the scheme and how successful it has been so far. But yeah, we're hopeful to try and get some more funding. We've been funded through ourselves and through Cycling Ireland and the Outdoor Partnership. So we're hoping to get some more additional funding to try and provide more training in the future to ensure sustainability of the scheme, increase the skill set, allow those relationships to be built, which are also important whenever it comes to engaging with land managers. So Robin, back to you. We're happy to take any questions.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. That was brilliant. I, as usual, have got loads of questions, so I'll kick off. But while I'm asking, guys, have a think about what you want to ask as well, and stick your hands up. So when Ethan was talking just about the history of trail centres in Northern Ireland, I thought that was really interesting. So from 2012 to 2014, 5 trail centres appeared. What made that happen at the time? Was it what was the sort of background to that? Was that the councils themselves? Was that tourism bodies? Where was the funding coming from, etc.?
Yeah, it was. I think sort of we would always class in recreation terms as sort of Northern Ireland being 15, 20 years behind, Scotland, England, Wales, etc. So I think that really over here there was a bit of a push on activity tourism at the time. The tourism bodies were seeing, that mountain biking was providing, economic benefits to the likes of Scotland, etc., for mountain bikers traveling, and they saw the increase in the development of, the interest in mountain biking within Northern Ireland, and even, across the island of Ireland. So there was a bit of impetus there to put a bit of money into developing trail centres to try and then try and increase the economic growth within those rural areas within the sport. So a lot of the money for those particular projects came from Tourism Northern Ireland, who at the time had a significant amount of capital monies available for that sort of work, which was brilliant. And then over the years, the money has been funded, since then, sort of the Gorchin Glens, which we weren't involved in delivering, but it was delivered maybe 5-6 years ago. It was funded through DAERA, which is the Department of Agriculture. I think it was through their TRIPSY scheme. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. And which is about tackling rural poverty and social isolation. So it's sort of a rural focus. And then Gosford was funded through the same particular project, and that's about trying to improve the public land, the forestry estate, and provide access. So so largely tourism is where it's come from. And there's just not as much money for tourism these days, particularly for capital development. But also the sort of the way that the mountain biking is changing from that formal setting into that more sort of informal setting. So there's a need to evolve.
Cool. And Ethan also mentioned consortium-owned trail centres. Did they all get together as a group then, or have I misunderstood?
Yeah, no. So the consortium is councils who had originally come together around about 2012 and decided that because they've obviously invested or were in the course of investing, had all these ambitions for phase 2, phase 3, then they wanted to develop a way to promote the trails. So that's where MountainBikeNI came from.
Right. Okay.
So the consortium is the land managers. So that's all those councils.
Okay. So so the consortium doesn't. The individual members of the consortium own individual trail centres rather than the consortium as a group owning them all together.
But it's important to say they don't own the trail centres. They they manage the trail centres, if you know what I mean. So
yeah. So for people that join late, they're usually owned by usually run by the local council, but on for a service NI leased land, right?
Yeah.
And who built the trails originally?
As in contractor?
Well, as in who were the trail builders? Was it local companies? Was it?
No. So there's a couple of local companies that have been involved predominantly local companies, local contractors. Originally, Davies was involved in the design, so we would have been involved in sort of the detailed trail design originally, and appointed Davies. We've been involved in Pete Lang as well, from a trail design perspective. But yes, construction, local contractors, and a few of the companies as a result of the work through the mountain biking trails have really scaled up, and they build really high quality mountain bike trails.
Cool. And obviously 2012 is a long time ago now. Do the local mountain bikers feel that those trails are still relevant or I mean, do you feel like there's a lot of complaints in parts of the UK that trail centres were built so long ago, and mountain biking's evolved, and bikes have evolved. What's your feeling? What's the local feeling about the trail centre trails? Is it just they need more maintenance, or do they need evolving once you've got the maintenance sorted?
I think you can never stand still with trail centres, but I don't feel like the trail centre's dead. But I think there definitely needs to be a bit of evolution, to incorporate, more of the sort of the informal trails that, there's a big interest in trail building, obviously, across the board. Even the style of trails now, they're a lot more flowy than what they were back in 2012. So if you are, thinking about trail centre trails, looking at Glentress and Lagan, etc., and, trying to replicate trails like that would certainly encourage more people. But there's definitely a significant interest in informal trail building. And part of this project is about, relationship building, increasing skill sets within rider or, sort of riding communities, etc., in the hopes that in the future we can get some of those informal trails and agreements in place. So yeah, Karen, anybody else want to sort of respond from sort of local riders, Gary, perspective as well?
I'll let Gary come in there maybe, and Bob has his hand up there too.
I'm just going to keep my camera off here for my data is dodgy here. My Wi-Fi's down. Anyway, not to quote Trump, but let's make the trail centres great again. No, I think it's very important, the message that we give across, and as I suppose ambassadors of the sports, we need to be seen to be supporting trail centres and supporting those land managers to be able to build trust and build relationships. And then in turn, there'll be, as Ethan once said to me, there'll be just a whole pile of ripple effects will come from that. And we've already started to see that already, like even not to mention any land managers, but the biggest issue was the lack of confidence. And even now, from where it was, we're not allowed to touch these trails, to, yeah, we can start to look about making doubles different sizes and changing corners slightly. And I think, yeah, there's going to be a lot of bigger positives. And yeah, we can make trail centres great again. And yeah, there'll be a lot more to come from it.
Brilliant. Bob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing discussion, isn't it? Where's mountain biking going, and where do trail centres fit in that place? We've got the rise and dominance of the commercial bike park, which is great, but I think a lot of people around the kind of driving force of trails are kind of going, community trails is the next big thing. We already know that they're already being ridden. That's where everyone's riding now. The trail centres still have a place. They're all weather. They're easy for that kind of mid-range people and more experienced riders that just want to go out and have a blast and not have to get into some brambles and stuff. But they've got their place. No one really knows where it is at the moment, but they're there, and they're going to need adapting and changing. They all need a bit of investment every now and then, and that's probably one of the big things that's missing. And I think from a Northern Ireland context, one of the big problems they've got is just the ground. It's Northern Ireland. The majority of it is a bog. And that's no disrespect to you guys, but so most of those trails are surfaced, and that's the reality of it. Is a lot of that maintenance work is going to be resurfacing, like you saw in the photos that Karen put up, and just keeping things up and running, because they don't have that kind of amazing, geographic. If you're in Scotland, you can rake away the moss, and you've got a trail on the granite. Particularly in South Wales, we've got the South Wales Gold, where you just rake off some organic stuff, and you've got amazing material to build with. So they're not fortunate with that, but I think. The trail centres will always have a place. The numbers have dropped. We've got counters in Wales, and you can see the kind of trail centres drop. But the community side, the community-driven trails are increasing, and it's how we then bring them on board. And like the guys have said, the next step is, once the trust is built, is starting going, so how do we build some new trails or some different trails, or the steeper techie stuff? People are kind of splitting up, and you're either bike park addict, or you're a bit of steep techie stuff, or you do a bit of both. And I think that's where the market's going to be going forwards. You know, e-bikes have changed trail centres massively now. No one comes out to a trail centre in Wales and does the whole 25-kilometre loop. They whiz around on their e-bike and do the sections they want to do. They build their own trail effectively. It's like a pick and mix game. And I think that's the next evolution of trail centres is you don't need a 20k loop. What you need is 4 or 5, 1 or 2, 3k descents, and people can move around the forest and kind of go and do the bit they want to do. So that's kind of my thought on it.
But that's the way of the future. Well, it's not a trail, to maintain first. Manon, you had a question for Karen, I think.
Yeah, I do. I couldn't put my hand up for some reason. And I've just been trying to hunt through a thought related to that last discussion. I was trying to find Leslie Inghamsill's poster from the IMBA Europe Summit because she had great data on Glentrass. And I'm sure I took a photo of it somewhere. But there was really high numbers for the trail centre trails, you know, the blues and the reds. And I think it does highlight if you've got really good trail centres, it's great for your more intermediate riders, you know, as Bob was saying as well, having those easy loops to go and do and that entrance pathway. I think we definitely can't forget how good they are for introducing people to the trails as well. My question for Karen was, there was a huge number of volunteer applicants for the maintenance session. How did you reach out to riders and people who were interested to help maintain the trails?
Yep, so thanks, Manon. Yeah, so definitely agree with that. And I see Gary putting a wee heart there. So me and Gary would be trying to organise some coaching with Cycling Ireland as well for the outdoor partnership and get more people into mountain biking, particularly looking these days maybe more at young people and how to engage them more. And the trail centre is really valuable tool for that. And the maintenance sessions have been really key for that as well. So I suppose just on reaching out to the volunteers, that was through the MountainBikeNI consortium that Ethan was talking about. So it has quite a big following, and I suppose quite a reach. And most, well, I don't know if all mountain bikers in Northern Ireland follow it or not, but through that post and through then sharing through local clubs and stuff like that, we were able to reach out to a lot of people because I suppose it's a small enough community really. We had an overwhelming response to I just loved sitting watching live, you know, the responses coming in, the numbers going up and up. And unfortunately we had limited money for training, and because it was a pilot as well, and we only had so much, so it was hard to select people for it. But we got, I think it was 19 volunteers trained, and hopefully if we can get another 19 maybe trained this year. But I suppose to say too that in the future we're hoping that you don't necessarily have to have done the training to be a volunteer. We just wanted at the early stage to sort of have everyone start on an equal playing field, so to speak. So land managers and volunteers having received the same training, and they're starting together on the journey essentially, and then they're building the skills together, and then we can sort of start to grow the groups. We kind of wanted to have 3 to 5 volunteers per trail centre to start with, a small team, and then just grow that kind of organically rather than, I suppose, reaching out and sort of allowing, maybe if you picked a figure and allowing people to come on board. We kind of wanted to grow it just organically to make sure that it was definitely going to be successful. And then the training next year I'd kind of envisage that to be for people who feel like they want the skills, and to maybe look at how can we diversify the pool of volunteers that we have, and maybe reach people who maybe aren't represented in that. So I suppose just because you haven't did the training doesn't mean you won't be involved, I suppose, is a key message for me for people. And we hope that everyone over time who wants to be involved will be involved in the scheme. So I hope that answers your question.
Cool. Well, while everyone else is thinking of their questions, I can tell they really are thinking really hard about it, which is why they haven't put their hands up yet. Going back to before the scheme started, right? So the trails were built in 2012, 2014. It's now 2025. We launched the scheme this year. What was happening with trail maintenance between when they were built and now? I mean, was the trail maintenance budgets that they put aside as part of that original funding, or did they not really do that because it was all meant to be capital spend and there was no sort of ongoing spend? What was sort of what was the reality of the situation with the maintenance of those trails over the last 10 years?
Yeah, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I suppose just maintenance has been really about upkeep. There hasn't been a lot of over here. We don't sort of have whole life project funding. You don't get funding beyond sort of the capital build normally. So maintenance funds have come from within councils. So when you know what councils are like, they sort of have limited resources. The biggest thing that the councils have been hit with most recently is, the number of storms, particularly that we had last year, and those have significantly impacted the trails. And there's not a lot of money there to repair that. So in a way, this particular scheme will help with that to an extent. It's not going to be the magic bullet, but it will certainly help to maintain some sections of trails and allow some of the trail centres to open sections that have been closed because they have that support. But yeah, like budgets are they come from the local councils to help manage them.
So
there's no sort of funding pot that comes from elsewhere.
Okay, but there was at least a sort of the bare level of level, basically.
I would say so. Yeah, I would say probably
Okay.
there's sort of just to sustain it and improve sections where budgets allow and where where pots of money can be inputted. Karen, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to come in and add, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn saying it because I feel like they would say it themselves, that maybe they probably they've definitely benefited from the training as well. It might be someone maintaining the trail who isn't necessarily a mountain biker, so they're doing what they can, I suppose, to keep the trail as is, as Philip says there, to keep the status quo. But what's been really important and what we wanted to get out of the maintenance scheme is that rider input is really important to sort of improve. Some of our trail centres are built better than others, I guess, and to sort of try and improve the flow and the enjoyability of certain sections, and that's already happened in the limited number of sessions we've had. We've had really positive feedback and engagement from riders. So that's kind of what we want to continue to develop, I guess. So yeah, maintenance probably was happening, but maybe not always as depending on which trail centre and things. We'll not get into specifics, I suppose, but definitely land managers have benefited, and they would say that themselves from the training that they availed of, inspector training in particular. They would say that themselves, that it's great to get an accredited course, get that training from Ali and Bob, who are industry experts, and to be aligning what they're doing, across the water, what's happening in Scotland. So yeah, that's we're trying to up the game, make the trail centre great again. Is that the new slogan?
Well, yeah. Well, going back to Gary and his make the trail centre great again. One of the things he said was, I can't remember the exact phrase, Gary, you used, but it was about they were afraid to touch the trails. Was that because they were worried that if they changed the trail, they were going to, they were putting themselves at liability risk because it wasn't as it was originally built? What was the issue there?
Yeah, I'll jump in if you want, Robin, because I mean, going back to Manon's question as well, you could say it was a waste of resources paying for land managers to kind of come on the course, because they, ultimately some of them are working on the trails, but most of them aren't. They're kind of just sat at the managerial level. But as Phil said right at the start, creating that trust, I've done several talks in Northern Ireland, and one side of the room is all the land managers, and on the other side of the room is all the mountain bikers, and nobody talks across the aisle. And that's through this scheme, that is massively changed. We saw in the 3 or 4 days we were there, we saw people almost trying to sit in different sides of the room, actually end up just chatting and talking about stuff. And it changed that building that trust, as Phil said at the start, was absolutely key with this. And even if those land managers now aren't involved with it, they understand it and they get it. And they're like, yeah, actually, it's not just a bunch of rogues running around. They know what they're doing, and they're keeping it within. But to answer your question, Robin, yeah, there was people higher up within the councils, and Karen and Phil might pick up on this after me, but we could see when we were running the training that they came in and went, you can't touch anything. It was designed 10 years ago and that's it. You can't change it because, legally that would be a problem. And it took us a while to kind of just work through that and go, this is normal. This is what we do in the rest of the UK. So there was this perceived thing that you couldn't touch anything. And I think that's, in fairness, Karen said it there, but I've seen it across multiple sites on the UK where something gets built and then it just lands on someone else's desk to look after it, and they're not passionate about mountain biking, they're not involved in it, and they're just trying to do the best job they can with really poor resources and no real training. And so I think building up that relationship, as Karen said, using the rider input to go, can we change these berms, and then understanding that they could change it if they wanted to, made a massive change there. And that's what I think the real value of this program is going to be, that building that trust that things can be changed and tweaked, and it's still a red trail or it's still a black trail or green trail, it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, that was something I was going to come on to. It does seem to be like a really key part of the success that you've had so far is the fact that you trained up, a really high proportion of land managers in that training progress. So they understood A, the process, but B, the volunteers that we were working on the trails. What proportion of them, are actually going to go on to run, to be involved in those maintenance sessions, and what proportion of them you had them along so they could go through that learning process, but they probably won't be involved much in the future apart from making decisions?
Most should all be involved. So I suppose the inspector training, it's not necessarily the same land manager member of staff who does inspections as was trained as the maintenance coordinator who'd actually be running the day. So usually maybe someone on slightly higher grades may be responsible for doing the inspections. But yeah, pretty much, I suppose the inspectors might not be involved in the actual hands-on of the maintenance day itself, but all of the coordinators are and have been involved, in working hand in hand with volunteers to plan and then actually coming out on the day. So, and they want that because it gives them confidence too. They're not ready to quite hand over the reins and let be volunteer led, and we're not there yet. Maybe in the future, who knows? But so it is like for them, it's like they still maintain control to a degree, and they have confidence then in the training and the accreditation. So having that training as an inspector, like several of them, said in the past, they're carrying out inspections and they're doing the best that they know how to do, but they loved having the opportunity to go on a course and actually hear how it's been done elsewhere, learn from other people within similar roles carrying out inspections, and just having the confidence that, oh, this is what I'm meant to be doing. Here's a process to follow. Here's a template to fill in. And then they've got that, I suppose, like rubber stamping it gives them a bit of confidence. And then knowing that once the maintenance is carried out, they can inspect it again. And if it's still within grade, so you can make small changes, not reroute the trail, but you can, maybe change the angle of the corner and stuff, and you don't necessarily need to be worried about that as long as you've documented what it is you did, why you did it, and how it still meets the trail grade. So, yeah, I see a few hands up, so just conscious of letting people come in there. I think.
Tim, just before we let Tim ask his question, going back to what you were saying there, so all of the inspectors are all land managers that you train up there. There's no volunteers doing inspections, and by implication, all of the trail maintenance coordinators are all land managers as well.
No, they're a mix. So they're a 50-50 mix of land managers and volunteers. So that was kind of the most important thing for me, that there was that split, or that mix, not split, that there's not an us and them, that it's okay. So we're gonna plan this together. We'll meet and we'll walk the trail and we'll decide what we do. And then our role, I suppose, in that is bringing the parties together, making sure that communication still happens, and then reaching out to the volunteers and helping just to coordinate and pull it together, and helping to, I suppose, promote that it's happened through MountainBikeNI, use the consortium to share the good news, I suppose. And just to make sure that it keeps happening, to keep the ball rolling, I suppose, so that it doesn't, so Yeah.
But the maintenance coordinator is the sort of a rider and a land manager sort of
Yeah.
jointly planning the sessions at each of the trail centres.
Yeah. So
Is that actually happening at all of them, or is that sort of is that the ideal?
yeah, no, well, there's two trail centres who unfortunately we had planned for someone to be trained up as a volunteer, but then there was sickness and they didn't get attending the course. So there's two of them where that isn't happening as we would like, I suppose, but there's an opportunity this spring to get someone else trained up and to get that happening. But across the other five, it is happening. And then Gary and myself were providing assistance, I suppose, where there's gaps to try and, so for those two trail centres, to try and fulfil that role in the interim, and then to make sure for those other five that the land manager and the volunteer are coming together and to facilitate that a wee bit as a kind of third party intermediate.
That's it's a really good model. It's very clever. Hopefully it keeps everyone happy, right? And it's it's good. It's good. Right, Tim, you've kept you waiting long enough.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do have a question, but because that was quite a long time ago, I have other thoughts before then. So yeah, I mean, sounds like you guys have been doing some fantastic work over there. I think the liability conversation that I was just listening to was quite interesting one in terms of it's something I've harped on about in the past about slightly misguided perspectives of liability. There was a scenario presented there where someone with some responsibility for a trail would look at it, maybe see a problem, but think, I can't touch that because I can't change it from the design. I could potentially create liability issues if I do that, whilst ignoring the fact that you've identified a problem and you've created a far bigger liability issue by not taking reasonable actions to address that. And it's hard to imagine any kind of common sense repair work or maintenance work could ever lead to something worse than identifying a problem with a trail and ignoring it because you're scared that you might get told off for changing the design. I mean, it's such a strange thing. And it sounds like I'm not teaching to anyone here as if that's not understood. I think, I say, you've done a really good job there in terms of helping them through that kind of silly place that they found themselves in to hopefully a better place where they can, apply common sense to these kind of things. But anyway, sorry, that wasn't my question. I thought that was quite an interesting point that people have been made. My question was obviously a lot of the stuff you've done is based around public funding, or at least benefited from public funding. And there's someone sort of sat in Wales looking at the sort of future course of travel of potential for future funding in Wales and the UK or England, I guess. I'm curious as to what the Irish perspective is on that, whether you have positive thoughts about going forward that you'll have access to funding to continue developing some of these projects, or are you moving to focusing more on a sort of volunteer, getting it done by hook or by crook kind of thing, rather than relying on money coming from the government or public sources?
Yeah, I think we can't rely on money coming in from public sources right now. There's not a lot of money out there. We haven't seen significant capital investment in sort of outdoor recreation probably for the last 3 to 5 years, maybe. And we don't know what funding is going to come down the stream, so we have to sort of work with what we have. So this is where this sort of project comes in, is really useful, and sort of sets hopefully a precedent going forward. But if there's capital monies that will come out in the future, hopefully we'll be in a better position and understand the community a lot better. So we'll be able to, spend the money in the right places on the right type of projects. Fingers crossed. But yeah, it's just a very difficult sort of funding climate out there at the moment, but hopefully we will get some more soon.
I think the way you're approaching, like saying, trying to empower people, like, you don't need big civil engineering companies. You need people with, some fairly basic tools and the passion to kind of go out there and make things better, and like say a bit of sort of pat on the back or support or whatever it is to know that, they're not going to get themselves in trouble, I guess, by doing it. So I think it's a good,
and I think
great model.
Just jumping in there, Tim, I think volunteer community-led groups will have access to far wider, great range of funding than the bodies that own the land. And that's proven its case across the UK. It doesn't matter where you live in the UK. A not-for-profit CIC community interest company that wants to build a new trail has access to far more funding than the landowner will ever have, because they just don't have those capital budgets. So, we're not there yet, but I think in the next, I'll be quite surprised in the next 5 years we don't see a community-built trail with substantial funding. Maybe working. I know Andy's got his hand up, but working with a contractor, a commercial contractor, and volunteers working together side by side. And it does happen in small scales, but I mean, a proper full trail getting put in.
Yeah, I mean, the project we're working on at our local school is probably fits that description. We've got some funding. We are, most of that funding is going on some trail building expertise, but mainly on materials and machines, and then a lot of goodwill going into it.
And I would just before we move on, I will say there is on the horizon, there is some funding going to come in, because we're going to get the tour kind of benefit come out. Now, we don't know what that looks like or where it's going to go, but there's going to be something. As Phil said, considering we've spent pretty much nothing in the last 5 years, anything will be better than where we are now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I just wanted to come in on something you'd said there, Tim. I suppose we have had maybe, some comments kind of online and stuff and feedback, like, why is volunteers doing this work when council, it's their trails, they should be maintaining them, why are they expecting like free labour essentially from volunteers? And it's a valid point, but I suppose there hasn't been the investment and there hasn't been the money. And so really rider input is what we need to improve the trails. I mean, what we were doing previously wasn't working, so giving riders an opportunity to actually get more involved. As Bob says there, volunteer groups can probably in the current climate maybe access more funding potentially than government. So it's a chance to build those relationships, improve what we have in terms of trail centres. And then potentially, if we've built the relationships and the trust, there's maybe an opportunity there to have community built trails, maybe like one community built trail within a trail centre site that could be adopted potentially by the land manager in the future, inspected and maintained in the same way. And maybe that's a way to expand what we have and develop it with real rider input, and develop trails that riders want to ride. Because there's a lot of people, I guess, saying, like looking to the south of Ireland and look at all the great trails they have, and that's what we need to be doing, that this is, a drop in the ocean, what we're trying to do with the maintenance scheme. And I suppose like that is also, I suppose, somewhat valid, but there's a lot of funding in the south that there isn't in the north, and so that funding isn't there. So for us, I suppose this is a way of moving things forward, and an opportunity for potentially rider built community trails in the future, who knows? But it all starts, as Gary said, with the ripple effects. You have to start somewhere, and it's about building up that trust and stuff. So who knows? We're off to a good start at least anyway.
Yeah, definitely better to do something than nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. I think it's good.
Well, Kieran, I don't know if it was your cat or you that had the question, but go ahead. Oh, you're on mute currently.
Unmute. There we are. I was trying to find the unmute button. Karen's just actually touched on the question I was going to ask. I was at a presentation a couple of months back by Colite talking about regenerative tourism in the south. And I was just wondering if there is actually any cross-border work and discussions going on.
I suppose they're separate. So in the south, that Quilsha, they manage and maintain the forest sites on behalf of their semi-state body, and then in the north, it's Forest Service NI, who are fully state, I suppose. So there wouldn't really be much, if any, crossover between the two. But I mean, there's possibly opportunities for maybe cross-border funding if two council areas were to work together. Peace Plus or things like that, but there might also be the opportunity for communities to access sort of Peace Plus funding, or so that is certainly an option, and something we're looking at the minute to see, well, what funding is there we can access to develop the scheme, but also just develop mountain biking in general, and how can we kind of move things forward. So there's something to look at there for sure, but I suppose they're separately managed in terms of the forest estates, and we're unique in the north with our councils take on the lease from Forest Service, whereas Quilsha develop, manage, and maintain their sites completely themselves without council input. They often work in partnership with councils to develop recreation, but in terms of their mountain bike trails, they are developing that and see it as something that brings them in revenue essentially, that they then can, generate revenue back to the state, whereas for a service, I suppose there isn't maybe the same onus on them to generate revenue for the north. So it's a slightly different setup, but
That's fine. I was thinking also the opportunities for training as well. As in, you might be at the point whereby critical mass between
yeah.
the two might come together there. So it was just, thank
Yeah.
you.
No problem. That's a good point on the training, and yeah, it's something we'll certainly offer. Like we've good relationship Outscape through working on different projects with Quilsha, so we'll certainly offer the opportunity to avail if Ali and Bob are coming over, or when Ali and Bob are coming back over to do more training, that maybe there's the opportunity for them to avail of that as well on synchroncies when they're on the island. So
just out of interest, do they charge for access to the trails in the south then that they've built, or is it just car parking? How do they make revenue out of the trails?
Yeah, so they don't charge, no, but I suppose, so say for Ticknock and Ballinasloe, there's biking.ie, and they would, maybe provide a trailhead facilities, like a building with a cafe and that, or, opportunities for someone to come in as a business and provide a cafe, a bike wash and things like that. So they're providing the infrastructure that then allows a commercial business to come in and generate money. But yeah, I suppose.
Okay, so it's quite similar to, I suppose, what happens in Wales and England and Scotland to a certain extent, in terms of the forestry services, running, providing contracts to local businesses and, competitive tenders to win cafes and bike car places, that sort of thing.
And there's the wider health benefits as well, Robin. They are recognising that in Southern Ireland, and that has been recognised elsewhere, but it's just not in the same column. It's not on the spreadsheet, is it? What's the social? And that's the other thing I was going to say is, I know there's people with their hands up, but the real value of the volunteering isn't actually the trail work, it's the social benefit stuff. For some people, the mental benefit of being out and doing something is huge. That's saving billions of pounds of health funding in the future. And I think British Cycling are doing quite a good job of quantifying that on their projects. And we need to look at how we turn those volunteer hours into social benefit value for the health service and see what funding comes in from that way.
Yeah, Robin, if I just say very briefly that what I did find interesting was the emphasis they were also putting on heritage, i.e. local history, local industry or previous industry from the, peat extraction and everything. And I think that's possibly an underexplored area for trail development generally in the UK in the way that we utilise heritage.
Cool. And then just before I let Andy ask his long-awaited question, all of those trail centres in the south, they're just much newer, and therefore, I suppose, feel a little bit more relevant to modern mountain bikers. Is that sum it up?
I wouldn't even, so the trail centres in the south, I'm not sure what year they were built, but up until pre-COVID, I suppose, or not even sure what year the revamp sort of started, but years ago, I went to Ballyhura mountain bike trails when I was down in that area, and maybe, I don't know, 7 years ago or something, and swore I'd never go back because I just didn't enjoy the trails, and I just thought they were quite, it was the same thing for 35 kilometres maybe, and but since the recent round of upgrades, they've been totally revamped, and it is worth the drive to it now. So I suppose they have recognised that there's, what they had maybe was what people wanted in 2010. Maybe it wasn't even what people wanted in 2010, I'm not sure, but that was before my time. But I suppose things have evolved. They have seen that that's not what people want, and so then the style of trails that they've brought in their phase two. It brings, as Bob was talking about, you know, that you can do laps of, you can pick a section you like and you can do pick a mix kind of, whereas before it was you have 35k loop there and that's, you know, that's the trail. So they've kind of seen the shift and they've brought on board, they, I suppose, seen also that there wasn't really maybe the contractors with specific mountain bike experience or expertise. And they actually reached out and sort of said, you know, we want to do a phase two and put the call out to mountain bikers to establish themselves as contractors and equip themselves that they could apply for the framework. So then that meant whenever the framework was established, you've got lots of, I suppose, you know, mountain bikers work alongside contractors in the south. You've got a couple of great companies operating in the south now that have been involved in those phase two. So again, that's that rider input. They've seen the value of that. They decided to do something about it, and I suppose encourage mountain bikers to get involved, and then we're seeing the fruits of that now. So I think like we're looking on thinking like they were where we are, I guess, maybe, and you know, ultimately we'd love to have a phase two where we could do similar and we could upgrade what we have, enhance it by putting in extra new lines, stuff for more beginners, more progression, stuff that people can lap, more flowy, you know, sections. But they're just, the funding isn't there for us. So our avenue for now anyway is if we can get, you know, riders more involved, as I say, with the volunteering, and then maybe rider built trails, or who knows. So yeah, I suppose they were starting from a similar place to us. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's just a pity they've got the money. That's no, that's a big part of the issue. Andy, go ahead.
I think Daniel had his hand up before me.
Oh, okay. You're on my screen. You came up first, but go ahead, Dan.
Kind of you. I love this term, make the trail centre great again, and I could envisage after sort of initial funding and then sporadic funding and then storms, this scheme just sounds like a godsend really for the trail centres. But I'm wondering what's the attitude towards risk, and once you get, let's say, imagine you've got that big community, lots of people getting involved, what's the attitude towards risk and building more advanced trails, be it blacks, be it double diamonds, triple diamonds, whatever it is. And the reason I'm asking that is I think one of the challenges, particularly in England with trail centres, from my perspective, is and the reason why you've got so much on sanctioned trails is maybe just a lack of development as riders' skills progressed, as bikes progressed. You've got a lack of development in the actual trails there, so they would either be a bit boring or a bit samey. But yeah, what's the general attitude when you think of the vision there and where it's going to go? Can you see more advanced trails, or do you think it will be more the reds and the blues?
I would say my gut isn't more the advanced. I suppose really though we could probably do with a mountain bike strategy where we look at what we have and we look at the sort of pyramid of what percentage of trails you might like to have: blue, red, black, you know, double black and that. Because I remember you talking about that before, Bob, about there kind of being a triangle of, you know, what proportion of trails you should have, you know, within each grade. So we probably need to look at that holistically and sort of see where the gaps are. But also for the trail centres, at least anyway, it's looking at the topography and what's suitable for that site too, because a lot of where our trail centres are, you know, they don't maybe have the gradient that they would ever meet, you know, a double black grade or anything like that. So I suppose really it's trying to have flowier trails that are fun for everybody. Like if we can have more blue and red flow trails, we jumps, we tabletops, and build in more progression that everyone can get fun out of. So like Yeah, when we were over in Glentress and we rode the new trails at the conference last year, so myself and Philip and Ethan, the trail that all three of us said we loved the most was actually the New Blue. So no matter how good you are, what your skill level, we just love the flow of it. And if you can do wee pops or jumps, you can, and if you can't, you can roll them, and everyone gets the same fun. So I suppose, yeah, but we need to look at it holistically for sure and see where our gaps are and where we want to go.
Cool. Andy?
Yeah, you've sort of answered some of my question. I was going to ask about what your sort of how you see things developing in the next sort of 5 years. So you sort of talked about, and what that answer you just gave then about the trying to figure out how you would work out which trails you need and get the progression sounds a fantastic way to go. What about your volunteer group? Where do you see that going in the next 5 years? What have you got ambitions for that? And I guess that's talking a little bit to that idea that you could potentially as a charity you can go and look for funding and that sort of thing.
I suppose I haven't really thought about maybe quantifying it so much, or what 5 years would maybe look like in terms of the volunteers. I suppose we kind of want to grow it that so initially if we 3 to 5, then maybe we have like a pool of 8 to 10 where you're not relying on the same volunteers all the time within each trail. If within each trail centre, if you had say a pool of 10,
Yeah.
and then you're not relying on the same people and getting burnout and stuff, and you can put out a date and hopefully it will suit some, maybe not all. I suppose maybe it would be like year 2 to 3, and then maybe beyond that, like I'd like to see more people trained up as coordinators and having that relationship with the lab managers, that then maybe there's a little core group of coordinators at each of the trail
Yeah.
centres, and then maybe you
Yeah.
can get to the stage where you're able to put a call out and say, just on the socials like Glen Trass would do, and say, we're having a day on this day, we're doing this section. You can sign up using this link if you're interested. We're capping it at 10
Yeah.
today or 5 or whatever the case may be. But I suppose then there's each trail centre will be slightly different depending on the land manager and where they're at. There's also tied in with what the two Garys, Gary McKeegan and Gary Donaldson, what they would be working on and trying to develop communities around each of the trail centres and working with local clubs through Cycling Ireland, trying to establish a community at each trail centre that then I suppose they maybe take on the ownership of maintenance at that site alongside the land manager. Maybe we get to the point where it's delegated to that club, who knows, and there's like an MOU set up between the two. But I'll let Gary come in on that one because I know he would have some thoughts.
That
Yeah,
sounds
no, you're stealing the words right out of my mouth. Potentially, you're referring to Gary McKeegan there. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think the whole idea is the trail centers are perfectly situated for hubs. So you have car
yeah.
park facilities, toilets, and if you can create a club around that hub, then I suppose you're onto a winner. And then it's trying to recognise with the governing body, not Gary, but the governing body, that trail digging and volunteering, that is a massive aspect of a club activity. Whereas opposed to previously it might be taking youth groups out or going
Yeah.
for a rope spin, whatever, whereas actual fact a dig session is a very much a club activity. So I suppose trying to breathe that in and create the clubs, there'll be so many ripple effects. So it's not necessarily just maintaining trails we're trying to do. It's everything or everything and.
Yeah, sounds great. I look forward to seeing it.
Just even Gareth in there and Karen as well. Probably links back to what Kieran said about Quilcha in the south. They are now looking at clubs coming in and looking after particular areas of the forest and stuff, and so that is one area that we're potentially exploring down the line. Maybe that 5 years is the way to look at it, because it's taken quite a lot of time and effort to bring forestry on board with us, and it's going to be small steps to make sure, as we've said from the way through, it's all about building trust and relationships. And for me, the big sell to forestry has been around mental and physical health, access to outdoors, and all of that sort of stuff. And so that's where, for me, it's going to take a bit of time before we can get to our blacks and things like that, which is perhaps what most of us in the call are looking for. But the reality is that, as Karen said, that there is so few kilometers of trail as there is, that it would be disproportionate to have more extreme trails whenever we don't have the basic trails there. So yeah, I think it's really about very slowly taking this and bringing everybody with us, bringing us the council, bringing the forestry and the funders with us, so that we can make this sustainable in all senses.
Yeah, I suppose the club trails that Gary was referring to there in the south is kind of looking at naturals predominantly with quilcha in the south, and we're not quite there yet with forestry service. But if we can demonstrate through the maintenance scheme, we can do with the official stuff, and then hopefully then we can say, well, we can use the same model, and we can do that with the support of Cycling Ireland on our natural trails as well, and allow clubs or established clubs that will take on the maintenance of certain forests and for natural trails as well, which would let us have events and open lots of doors that lots of people have been banging for many years.
So mountain bikers are sort of famously anti-authoritarian, and obviously, a lot of them have a fractious relationship with the cycling NGBs. Not all of them, but some of them. And if you look at what's happening in the rest of the UK, there's a variety of different success models, and there are some really good examples of, official British cycling or Scottish cycling or Welsh cycling clubs that are, maintaining trails and also doing all the other aspects of what a traditional cycling club does. So Bedgebury Forest CC, or the guys up in Hammersley Forest is another good example of a British cycling club doing really good work and building trails and maintaining trails. And there's a couple of good examples in Scotland as well. But overall, actually, if you look, it's actually mostly sort of trail associations that are sort of organically formed just to sort of look after their trails. And sometimes they built the trails themselves and they've become official over time. Sometimes they've just formed to look after trails. So Jacob, who's on the call, is a member of Chase Trails, which is a trail building trail association in Cannock Chase. So I suppose, what's your thoughts on that? Like, do you see trail associations forming first, and then all of the other sort of organic club stuff happening after that, in terms of them starting doing club trail rides and that sort of thing? Or do you feel it really needs to be sort of come from the club outwards or come from the trails upwards? I suppose
I would just say, my own personal view on it is that we're probably using the word club too strongly. That it could be an association. It's people looking after the habitat, looking after the area, and riding bikes, and whether that's in a formal, shouldn't say this with my Cycling Ireland top on, but whether that's a formal club or whether it's just a group of people who like to ride there. I don't really have an issue with that, but yeah, call them what you will, but it's groups of like-minded people.
Okay, and do you see, and there's obviously not to anyone in particular, but do you see over time those those trail associations, those clubs, those groups, whatever you want to call them, would actually take on ownership of maintaining the trails, or do you not see that ever happening? But bearing in mind the sort of landowner environment in Northern Ireland.
I would hope that we could see that happening. Maybe that's like, I'm not sure how far away, but and I agree with Gary there. Like, I suppose club doesn't necessarily mean Cycling Ireland affiliated constituted club. Like, it could, I suppose the thing is with Forest Service, they've said in the past, which probably won't change, that they will engage with a constituted group. So that they don't stipulate it has to be Cycling Ireland as far as I'm aware, but so whether that's a club or a trail association or just constituted in some kind of way, and maybe grassroots can come in on that as well, and they might have some thoughts on that too. Don't know if there's anyone on the call from there, but yeah, so I suppose whether it's trail up or club down, I don't know, it'll depend on the site as well and what's already there. Like, I mean, we don't really have any trail associations as such in the way that you would have them across the water. So we probably need to, site by site and talk to the riders and see where they're at and what would be acceptable to them, like what would they like to see and how would they like to proceed with it and what would that look like for them, and support them on that journey, whatever that looks like, whether it's Cycling Ireland, whether it's like Cave Hill in the middle, or maybe it's something new, who knows, but and so we'll just site by site and chat to the riders, and I think
That sounds really sensible. So going back to the sort of short-term future, so currently none of the landowners are feeling confident enough yet to allow volunteers that haven't been on the training to come and help on days. What's your hope for when that might change, that you can just ask people to sign up to come and help out on a dig day?
I would say so next year I would be hoping like we'll be expanding the team, but I would say we'll not be at the stage of it being kind of an open online invite for anyone to come maybe yet, until we've maybe some more under our belt. I think just land managers want to build up confidence just little by little, just to make sure that it's successful and that it doesn't, I suppose, um yeah, it doesn't stop before it starts.
It's a common fear that a lot of landowners have. If you teach people how to build trails, they might just go off and build them their own and create problems for them elsewhere, right? It's not I know what you're hinting at. And that confidence building process is crucial. I'm not. There's no critique implied in the question. It's just when do you hope that will happen? Sometime next year is what I'm reading into that. Possibly,
towards the end of next year, I would say, if we can get training for, I suppose there's maybe some land manager staff that might like to avail the training that didn't the last time round, and then maybe open it up. We definitely want more maintenance coordinator volunteers trained up to make sure, like in an ideal world, we would have 2 at each trail centre, and then have the maintenance skills more for volunteers who feel like that they would like to volunteer but maybe don't have the skills, so that that's sort of providing that opportunity for them, because we appreciate that not every mountain biker needs to be going on the skills course, like they have a lot of skills already. So I suppose we'll be hoping to grow the teams at each of the trail centres in the springtime, and start to invite in people who are like local club members that are active and involved, and bring them into the team. So yeah, just organically, I guess, and with the lab managers, because we don't want to scare them off. But yeah, by the end of next year, hopefully we'll have like 10 people actively involved, let's say, at each trail centre. Would be great.
Okay. And you also talked about, I can't remember the exact figure you gave, but clearly you're not running the volunteer sessions every week with just the people you've got, or even every month currently. Like, what's stopping you sort of increasing the frequency of the sessions just with your current number of people you've trained up?
Yeah, I suppose we found in the spring was our training, getting our tools, getting our paperwork, getting organised. When we came to the summer, which was a bit of a lesson learned for next year, it's really hard to get a small group of people available on the same dates throughout the summer. So I suppose that did delay things a little bit. So that's another reason why you want to increase the pool as much as possible, to just make sure, like if you put out a date, that people aren't under pressure, you're not trying to make sure it suits everybody. So yeah, I suppose that did delay things a little, but yeah, lab managers, I suppose so far they want to be involved in all the sessions and they want to be there. So it's their availability as well, and with annual leave and different things. So I guess next year, if we maybe do get to the point of maybe there's trust built up where the land manager delegates to the trusted maintenance coordinator who's a volunteer to run the day. Maybe they chat beforehand, they line up what's going to be done. Maybe then the volunteers could go do it on a Saturday or Sunday, and then our manager come and sign it off after, and then there wouldn't be an obligation for them to be there, I suppose. So availability so far, I would say, is probably with a small pool of people. But
okay, makes sense. Bob, you've had your hand up for a while. Well, you're on mute. Bob, you're on mute.
Just picking up off the back of what Karen said there, right now the sessions are being insured by the local council, so they obviously want a member of staff there. So for now, that's a quick fix. It's got people on the ground, only small numbers, but it's got people on the ground at a level where senior managers are happy for that to go on because they're insuring it. But for them to insure it, they need a member of staff on there now. But I think in time that'll ease it off, and that's where Northern Ireland's managed to jump ahead of where we're at in Wales and England because they've solved the insurance problem, because the local authority is just like, we'll do it. But we have to have, we're going to sign the work off as being complete, which is one way of doing it. Going back to what you said, Robin, I think one of the big things, without going down the wormhole of insurance at 9:30 at night, if British Cycling do pull off this ability to insure volunteer groups to go out and work on trails, which it does sound like it's going to happen, I'm personally skeptical, but I'll quite happily eat my words going forwards if it does. Then there's a reason for me as a mountain biker to be part of one of those bodies, because they'll insure my volunteer group that are going out. Right now, unless you race, there's no need to. And if you race, you have to be, so it's not a choice. But I think moving forwards, we'll see what that space, that discussion is going to get rounded out in the next weeks, months. We're going to know what that answer is. Because I think Manus was very open to us on a meeting last week with Gary was on as well. British cycling staff actually don't know what their insurance covers right now, and they're trying to work that out internally and talk to their insurance brokers. And once they've done that, and we know whether actually, if you're an affiliated club, your works on the ground is insured, that will change where we're at with volunteers massively. But until that conversation comes out, we don't know. So just adding to that, really.
Thanks, Bob. And I suppose we'll be watching this space with the South as well, and the club trails with Cycling Ireland, to see how that progresses and see can that be applied in the North as well, since the Cycling Ireland covers both. So I suppose, we'll watch this space and see how it develops. Yeah,
I mean, it is a problem, don't get me wrong, but it's not an insurmountable one even without that in place. Like most trail associations in the UK are able to raise enough money to get, the third party insurance they need to run training, or there are other models as well. Jacob, I don't know if you want to talk about the model that's sort of currently in operation at Cannock Chase, just really briefly. You don't have to if you don't want to. Oh, we can't hear you for some reason, even though you don't look like you're on mute.
Any better?
Yeah, now we can hear you now, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I can talk about it to the extent that I actually understand it. Chase Trails, I believe, is one of the oldest trail associations in the country, and Cannock Chase was kind of a pioneer in like the trail centre type places. However, it kind of died off during COVID, and the group is sort of just about getting back on its feet now, and have had a good year this year. And how it is currently structured is how to say this politely. No, it's very closely associated with Forestry England, and the two kind of leads of Chase Trails are directly trained by Forestry England as like lead volunteers. They're able to drive Forestry England trucks and use all the stuff, but it's Forestry England that have done that training, and I'm pretty sure it's them providing the insurance as well.
Yeah, so they're still operating as a group and a club, but sort of under, officially on a trail maintenance day, there's a trained Forestry England volunteer manager who happens to be a member of Chase Trails, but has been on the same training as volunteer managers that look after people doing, hedgerow trimming and, various other bits of volunteer work on forestry in the estate. And then the volunteers that turn up are also members of, Trace Trails, but officially they're Forestry England volunteers that have signed up through the Forestry England system and are, insured and vetted in the same way.
Yes, so I mean, it takes away a lot of the kind of boring drudgery of doing all the of doing paperwork, which is a big advantage for a group that is getting on its feet, getting back on its feet, and has that kind of few people that are willing to do all that stuff. Yeah, so it's been working well so far.
Oh, thanks, Jacob. Sorry to put you on the spot. Jez, you got your hand up. I'm gonna let it run for a little bit longer because Jez has got a question, and I've got a question, another question I want to ask as well.
Yeah, well, I just thought SingletrAction, you might want to know where we're at, but we have our own insurance, which is through Zurich, which allows us to run volunteer days, which the Forest Commission are happy with, which I send in the certificate every year. And at Stainburn, we actually do run the whole thing. We basically run the site for the Forest Commission because they don't make any money there. But at Dalby, we are still run under the auspices of Forest Commission. So they then, but we now run the sessions for them because they're so short staffed. They can't always provide a rec ranger on the day, so it's a mix. So some days we're there on our own, and some days we're there with the rec ranger. Just thought everybody, so you can get to the point where you're running the sessions yourself, and the forestry have provided very specific training in certain areas where they want us to be doing that. So two of our myself and one of the guy are trail inspectors, which have been on the forestry trail inspectors course. And we have a guy who can drive the vehicles for us at Dalby. So you can get a hybrid scheme going. It is possible.
Obviously it relies on the forestry organisation having an official volunteering scheme of any description, which I'm not sure Forest Service NI does.
Yeah.
Right, so I have a final question, and I don't want to sort of focus on this. This is not the main focus of my questions at all, but we've talked about, I can't remember the phrase you used, Karen, but I would call them wild trails or unofficial trails. You might call them, I would probably like to use the word community built trails, because that's a nice positive way of talking about them. But have you got an idea of like what proportion of, I saw Bob present years ago where he talked about the proportion of people riding wild trails versus official trails. Have you got an idea of the sort of usage of trails in Northern Ireland and what proportion of riders are riding official versus unofficial?
I would love to. I would love to have them stats, but no, I don't. But I suppose from my own personal experience, I mean, I mostly ride natural trails, and most of my friends and clubmates and would ride mostly naturals. I mean, I would enjoy the trail centres in the winter, say, when the weather's not great and you want a reliable surface, or you don't want to be covered in mud, or you want a night bike or something like that. So I imagine a larger proportion maybe ride naturals. Maybe that's just my perception. But yeah, it would be very interesting to see the stats. And yeah, that's a
Do
few.
they tend to be focused around the trail centres? Is it the same forest as the trail centres, or
Not
is it?
necessarily, yeah, usually different. So, I suppose the trail centres, as Bob alluded to, about us having a lot of bogs. So a lot of our trail centres, like say Dava, Gorchin and stuff like that. Well, Gorchin there's natural trails on one side of the road, and there's purpose-built trail centre trails on the other. Dava is a bog, so there's not really many naturals in that area. Trail centre built. So it depends on the site. Garva, there would be a mix. Castlewellan, small number of naturals. Rostrevor, lots of naturals, as well as the trail centre. So it's probably got the best ground for trail building, really. So yeah, mix, but then there's lots of sites like Tollymore and Donard and Tardree and different places that are solely natural trails built by the community and local riders. So yeah, we actually have lots of great trails, like natural trails, and Maybe our trail centres aren't always the best, but we're working on that one. But we actually have lots of great trails.
I was looking at stats. I think we've got 240 kilometers of official trails across the trail centres and skills parks, and we have 530 kilometers of trails on trail forks, which will include trail centre trails. So I mean, most of the trails in Northern Ireland are, certainly that from that sort of evidence base is, are informal trails, and quite a lot of trail centres have been closed or, semi-closed for quite a long time. So people have to be riding, somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar picture across the whole of the UK. I mean, we did in our survey, we did a tentative estimate that sort of, 80 to 90% of the trails, in the UK are, natural trails, as Karen would call them, community built trails, and I suppose, as part of this process, have you been able to engage with Forestry Service NI much, or is it just the councils? Do you see a journey that you can take them on, possibly over 10, 20 years, not over a period of months or 1 or 2 years, but, are you starting to see that engagement, or are they really not involved in this process at all at this stage?
Yeah, no, there is some, I suppose, don't know if Gary McKeegan's still on the call or if he wants to come in on
it. It took me a year in post to actually get a meeting with him. So that was a year of emailing, phoning, and eventually went through some of the MLAs, some of our local elected representatives, to get a meeting. Once in that meeting, they're actually starting to understand why they need to engage with us. And yeah, I've been more positive than I thought they would have been, but I think probably because I said let's focus on the trail centres first. Let's do all of this stuff on those first, and then look at some events on maybe community built trails or race events where they would come and use it once for an event, rather than all this other stuff that they know is happening and that they have issues with, and some rightly they have issues with because of some of the stuff that's being built and how it's, could be seen as being unsafe or is unsafe for people who don't know what's there. So yeah, very much they're, I would say keen is maybe a strong word to be involved, but they are on board for now, and I'm working really hard to try and keep them on board and show them what's in it for them. I think that's really been my message from day one is, this is going to help you because, and I suppose that's where getting all of those volunteers who wanted to do the trail maintenance was a real good sign that, these aren't mad people out here who want to go and wreck forests. These are actually people who care. And so we've been able to bring that back to them and say, these are genuinely people who want to make things better and work with official bodies. So that's where they're at. And hopefully in the next couple of months, we will get a license to run events in the forest, which hasn't happened for at least since COVID, if not before. And so that's something that's going to happen, in the next, by 2026, they're going to give us 5 or 6 licenses for different forests to do events on a sort of ongoing period, and depending on how they go, then expand that. And at some point, we'll get them on board with all the rest of it.
I just add, sort of from an organisational point of view, we would engage quite frequently with Forest Service around outdoor recreation in general. We're wider than just mountain biking, but we find that they're very easy to engage with, good to engage with in relation to outdoor recreation in general. We haven't felt that they have needed to come in just yet, or until maybe now on this particular scheme. They engaged with the UK Trails Project, with support from ourselves. And I feel like now is the time to start engaging with them through this, or for this particular, project, this particular scheme, to make them aware that actually, this is what we can do, and this is, how we can skill up the mountain bikers, how we now have the support from, the NGB, which has always been really important for them. And we have support from the land managers. So I think we're in a good position to sort of show them from an evidenced point of view that, how something like this can work. Mountain Bike or Forest Service Northern Ireland, they have a small remit for outdoor recreation. They're not like Quilcha, who's very different, who also has a significant remit for outdoor recreation. So they're coming from a different base as well. They're coming purely from a forestry base. So I would hope that, the meeting that Gary's talking about and the work that Cycling Ireland are doing to try and, do the events plus this particular scheme will, allow them to engage, more and increasingly.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the risks and benefits, right? At the moment, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're sort of effectively pretending that the wild trails, the natural trails, don't exist, right? Is that fair or not?
I think they know they exist, but they have just they probably don't have the resource, to manage them, or they don't know how to manage them. Whereas now we're able to show them actually, it doesn't take a lot of resource to manage those. So we need to show this to them to show that there is a model out there.
And I think just jumping in there, Robin, I think there's the pace will pick up when we haven't got many community groups over the line yet across the UK. We haven't got anything really in Wales, but that's hopefully imminent. But I think Scotland's just about to launch a new unofficial wild trail strategy, community trail strategy, which I don't think is massively different. It's to try and make it easier. I know Dan's desperate to rewrite the English one. That was one of his mission statements when he started at Forest England. He just hasn't had time, so he's very keen to look at that. And I think between Dave Liddy in Wales, Dan in England, and Fiona in Scotland, there's a rewrite of all. Scotland's going to launch theirs. I think it's getting signed off this week, so it's not, you can't get hold of it yet. But those three have shared those old strategies, and I think once that picks up, Northern Ireland will be very quickly able to kind of jump on board and just develop their own wild trail strategy. They're all very similar. There's some slight legal differences. You've got open access in Scotland. You've got open access land in Wales, which changes it a little bit to England, but their basic principles are the same. If it's not dangerous and it's not doing any massive ecological harm, then the right trail and the right thing can be looked after.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, cool. Look, can I just thank you so much, guys. That has been absolutely brilliant. All of you have contributed, loads, and I found it really, really useful, and so awesome to learn about, the history and the context, but also, the brilliant work that you guys have done. And I have, it's going to be brilliant to see how things develop in the future. So thank you so much for spending the time. Thank you everyone for joining the call. And hopefully see you all next month. So thanks very much, guys.
Thanks for the time.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, cheers. Just share a sticker with you.
Yeah.
Picked up from the IMBA conference.
No community,
no trails. And that I was thinking about it as we were talking. I mean, I don't want to drag it on, but that's as a land manager, if there's no community, then I can't let the trails be adopted. If there is a community willing to look after it, that are local and want to be involved, then actually, as long as it's not in the middle of a triple SI somewhere, then really there's no big drama about it. It can be done. The mechanism's there, and I think we're going to see the pace of that pick up massively in the next 3 to 4 years.
Cool. Wise words for Bob to end it on. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.